Let's start with the ugliness of John Maynard Keynes. He thought himself an ugly devil. I have a clever head, a weak character, an affectionate disposition, and a repulsive appearance. He told someone whom he fancied was hesitating to make pounce on. I've always suffered from an unalterable certainty that I'm so physically repulsive that I have no business to hold my body in anyone else's. And that's what he thought, and in consequence he became a tremendous and very effective flirt. He compensated for his repellent appearance by projecting his strong personality on people he was talking to, charming them to bits, persuading them to do things that they didn't want to do. His letters show him flirting all the time with people as unlikely as Albert Einstein and David Lloyd George. He was the great persuader of cabinet ministers, Whitehall officials, bankers, university seminars. He had a syndicated newspaper column. He went stomping around the country all the time, talking, making public speeches. And there's an extraordinary occasion when he's mobbed on the platform at Blackpool Station by Blackpool Railway workers who the previous evening had heard him giving a lecture in the Winter Gardens on rates of taxation. He was the foremost economist of the 20th century, but there's almost no economics in my book. I wrote it for a particular friend who said to me, I'm tremendously interested in Keynes as a cultural figure, but reading more than 2 paragraphs of pure economics sends me into a coma. He was a paramount example of a scholar as a man of action. Isaiah Berlin thought him the most intellectually awe-inspiring person he'd ever met. Lord Beaverbrook, who after all was the master manipulator of public opinion, said that Keynes was Britain's greatest living propagandist. And I rank him with as a 20th century leader in his impact with people like Lenin and Stalin and Roosevelt and Churchill, Mao Zedong and de Gaulle. I haven't got time to recount all the extraordinary number of things that Keynes did. In fact, when I finished the book, I spent about 3 weeks in bed eating soft-scented chocolates, utterly exhausted by the trouble of actually writing about him. He was a chairman of investment companies that were very successful. He was a currency speculator. He owned an art gallery. He was a ballet patron. He was a theatre impresario. He had a huge collection of rare books and manuscripts that he bought for himself. He wrote pamphlets. He was a school governor. He was a bursar of Cambridge College. He was vice president of Mary Stopes' Society for Constructive Birth Control, great advocate for contraception. He was a pioneer advocate of equal pay for women, and he was a pioneer campaigner against ugly, piecemeal development of the English landscape. He particularly hated electric pilots as they went across the Sussex Downs. And then during 1940 to 46, he was not only a full-time official of the Treasury, he was lead negotiator in the incredibly stressful negotiations with the Americans over Lend-Lease, over setting up the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, and then in saving Attlee's Britain from absolute bankruptcy in 1945 to 46. He knew then that he had advanced heart disease, that the stress of his negotiations, which went on hour after hour, day after day, was killing him. And he absolutely knowingly gave his life for the cause of keeping England from bankruptcy. And I can't understand people who write biographies of people they despise or find distasteful. The only point of writing a biography is to indulge in hero worship. all my smart friends who know about these things tell me that if you take two sets of similar teenagers and find out which ones go off and become delinquents and get criminal records and those who don't, the ones who don't are the ones who know about hero worship and have sportsmen or parents or teachers or somebody or grandparents as heroes that they can look up to and they go straight. And I read this biography of Keynes certainly as a way of warding off my tendency to senile delinquency. Keynes, I also wrote it because Keynes is always presented as progressive and as a left-winger. But to me, he wasn't that at all. He was nostalgic. He was an elitist. He believed that Edwardian England, where he'd been a young man, represented a peak of civilized values. He thought everything that happened after 1914 was downward all the way. And one anecdote which shows this, in 1943, someone asked Keynes, who should become Prime Minister if Winston Churchill falls onto a bus? And Keynes replied absolutely seriously and immediately, William Temple, Archbishop of Canterbury, was the only man who held the country together. And that is actually, that's the heart of Keynes is in that remark. He believed in the comforts and the privileges and stability of the Edwardian world, as all of the Bloomsbury people did. He thought, he remembered high comedy and charm and comfort above all in the house of Virginia's grandparents. Keynes had, although he was the most important and influential economist of the 20th century, he had only 8 weeks of university undergraduate training in it, and he never sat an exam in it. No one, believe me, becomes an economist by an uncontrollable impulse. He became an economist simply as a practical way of getting back to Cambridge, to the conversation and the love affairs with his friends and to the beautiful buildings in Cambridge. And he became a lecturer there in 1908, entirely on social and aesthetic grounds. He believed that if humanity was to be saved from self-destruction, it must intensify its powers of sympathetic imagination and the affinity between strangers. What he called the assertion of truth, the dissipation of hate, the enlargement of men's hearts and minds, gave him a huge faith in the arts, and the arts as a civilizing force that made people behave better and think more imaginatively. And one of the great stories of his life is how he raised the money that started the Arts Council of Great Britain, and how he saved the Royal Opera House in Covent Garden, which at the time was a Mecca dance hall, demolition, and brought it back into life as an opera house. Keynes desired social justice. He hated communism, particularly because of his Russian wife, with whom he visited Soviet Russia on several occasions. But he despised, contrary to what many people think, he despised socialism and labour and peace. The class war will always find me on the side of the educated bourgeoisie, he said. Too much is decided, he continued, in the Labour Party by those who do not know at all remotely what they're talking about. This is the party which hates or despises existing institutions and believes that great good will merely come from overthrowing them, or that overthrowing institutions is necessarily preliminary to doing any good at all. He loathed the notion of a socialist nirvana with rules and regulations, and he was a great believer in individual initiative. He thought individual initiative made people humane, it enriched character, it made people feel more personally fulfilled, and it led them into good work in the arts and in scholarship and in philanthropy. Stephen Fay, who's here, told me earlier that the best bits of my book is the chapter on sex.
Well done, Sue.
We've all just had a heavy meal, so I'm not in fact going to talk at great length now about Keynes' sex life. As a young man, he had lots and lots of young men, mainly working class, which was in fact very good for his character, because he had to be, when he was picking up young men on bus stops or on trains, he had to chat them up patiently. They were much less intelligent than him, and he was patient, and he took time for getting off with them. Once he gave up picking up young men and moved over to women, he became much more impatient and ill-tempered and brusque. He married a wonderful, in middle age, he married a Russian ballerina, Lopakova, who kept him alive. It was the most tremendously successful marriage, unexpectedly, and to the astonishment of all their friends. He belonged to a generation, there was of men who really didn't know their business where women were concerned generally. I think he had a contemporary called Lord Strafford, who famously said to his bride on their wedding night, "Cora, ladies don't move." But Keynes, who was a Cambridge Don, got all his working knowledge from books. When he decided he was going to take a mistress and marry her, he got hold of Mary Stokes' textbook on married love, and he learned all the moves very carefully, and it turned out to be the most considerate and attentive and successful husband as a result. Keynes was, in that sense, and in others, the very model of an Oldie reader. He detested what he called the goody-goody gang. The busybodies of the spoil sports, he said, who had converted Merry England into a place of puritanical gloom. A workaholic himself, he wanted other people to enjoy shorter working hours, long and expensive holidays, and long, sunny, prosperous retirements. In that sense, at least at this lunch, we're all Keynesians now.